So my name is Matt Hajda, and I'm really excited to come out today and speak to you guys. Just to clarify, I'm not the security architect. I'm one of, I think we have almost 9 security architects. I have portfolio architect responsibility, which means I'm looking at the broad portfolio. I'm recovering from as identity access management architect. So I spent several years working on that focus area, which is where we've done the bulk of our work in this passwordless authentication journey. Quick show of hands, who is familiar with USAA? Okay, good. Most everyone. It's helped now that we have a lot of TV commercials. 5 or 10 years ago, we used to go out and almost nobody knew who you were unless you were from the military or had somebody that was already membership. I used to say that USAA is the biggest company that you've never heard about. And what I want to do is, again, that's kind of my background. Just the other thing to know is that I've worked in all different areas of security. So I've worked everything down to the operations side, primarily on Active Directory and PKI infrastructure. I spent 5 or 6 years in our Cyber Threat Operations Center, really as a security operations analyst looking for, doing malware analysis and looking for advanced persistent threat. And then now I'm on the architecture side, focusing on building the security controls in our technologies to get ahead of it. Mike Stewart, my co-presenter, had something come up at the last minute. He wasn't able to join me this morning, but he and I are a team. I'm more of the technical architect side, so I make sure that the technology is working and designed properly, whereas he's more on the business side. It helps with the people and process component, but I'm going to cover that for him. I wanted to start with the mission at USAA to understand why we're out here. USAA starts every single presentation and every single meeting with the mission slide. We speak to how the content drives the mission. So our mission is facilitating the financial security of the members and associates through and their families' provision of highly competitive financial products and services. In so doing, USAA seeks to be the provider of choice for the military community, right? Everything we do drives to that mission. And the reason I'm here, we don't normally do a speaking circuit, right? We're not selling any security products, so which is usually where people have this advice. The reason I'm out here is that I want to make your organization stronger by implementing multi-factor authentication for the workforce and provide kind of a roadmap of how we're doing that internally. USAA has been around for almost 100 years, and so we have 40 and 50 years worth of technology and technical debt. We have 12 mainframe core processors. Every piece of technology, operating system, application that has existed across financial services and financial industry, investments, et cetera, we've got it, right? So what I provide is a little bit of hope that if we can manage this transition, so can you. And ultimately make the entire ecosystem more secure, resulting in our members being more secure, right? Because information that goes out there is turned around and used for attackers to try to break into our member accounts. So as we go through this, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. Again, I just have some high-level bullet points to talk through, but I really want this to be interactive and try to help provide guidance. So. Here's kind of the general agenda. We're going to cover this from a people, process, and technology focus area. From the people side, experience design and change management process. How do we actually do the enrollment process for the members? But I'm going to start with the technology first, right? What are we actually implementing? What are the changes that we're making? And then we'll back into the people and process side. So first, kind of a look at what we currently have available for the members. Certainly for any external access, it's all multi-factored right now, but the experience isn't great. It's a username, password, and a one-time access code, which works pretty well if you're only accessing VPN once a day, right, or once every couple of days. We have a couple of different shifts in technology that are driving this as a pain point. One of those is a heavy focus on virtualized desktop infrastructure. If you take a look at this is a corporate laptop that I have that's completely off the domain. It's really more of a bring your own device type unmanaged workstation, and which means before I was authenticating maybe once a day. Now I'm authenticating to that same system maybe 15, 20 times a day sometimes, right? If I lose a connection, reconnect. Each one having to enter that 6-digit code is extremely painful. And every time I hear about it, it's probably 5 or 10 times a day, right? Of somebody complaining about how bad the experience is. So this has worked for a while. But what we're doing is taking that experience and we're rolling out a significant more options for the workforce. If you look on the right-hand side, actually one other thing to mention too, for the token before, it really came in two form factors, right? It was a keychain that you could for non-mobile users, or it's going to be an iPhone application or Android application that'll run that. So we've taken that and we're expanding it so that we now, if you look on the right-hand side, have a lot more options, right? We still have that one-time code for a lot of reasons. There's back-end systems that can only accept a one-time code, but writing in a mobile push capability. So people just have to click a button, it'll send a push notification to their phone. We pair that with mobile biometrics on the phone using local biometrics on the iPhone, such as Touch ID. Now coming up, it'll be facial recognition with the iPhone X. And then on the Android side, there's this giant matrix of compatibility, but if the Android device supports biometrics, right, then we'll make use of those as well. Otherwise, it's a pin on the Android phone. And then the one we're most excited about is a mobile proximity capability. So we're working with a vendor here to build that as kind of first to the industry. And that is really I describe it to the workforce as being like a keyless car, right? So as long as you have your phone within your pocket, as you're coming up to the workstation, we're constantly looking for Bluetooth. It pairs with your workstation, and we're using that as one of the factors, which is something that you have, and have a pin onto the desktop or on the laptop, which is something that you know. We have multi-factor authentication. They can keep it in their pocket, which is a much better experience for them to log in. And we still have, on the left-hand side, non-mobile options. So we have 30,000 employees and a great number of contractors on top of that help us with different capabilities. Not all of them are going to be eligible for or choose to use their mobile phones, right? So in my environment, working in IT, I have to have a cell phone that's always up and running and connected. So I'm part of our BYOD program where USAA pays for my bill, and I use that experience. So out of that 30,000 users, about 12 to 15,000 of them fall in that scenario where they either have the program or they'll choose to use their personal phone for the best experience possible. For the people that don't fit that category, we're still retaining physical access to the workstation. So that's going to be still a keychain for a one-time access code, or the use of their employee badge with an RFID reader on their desktop. This enabled us to roll this out without reissuing the cards and going over to a smart card, which is a very expensive process. So we think we found kind of the sweet spot. When I first started looking at this probably 10 years ago, it was all smart card technology. And you're looking at going $7 to $10 for each one of those smart cards to roll it out, and the massive infrastructure to do that. The ROI and the experience was just so significantly different, we decided not to do that. So we're excited that we're able to loop back now, being that 2017, and the mobile side, and all these things are really coming together to make an experience good. So that's really what you're going to use for the authentication options, regardless of where you're authenticating. But this really brought together, as we're rolling this project out, one of the issues that we have. When you have a mobile phone, right, your entire life, as you know, is living on your iPhone. And the issue we've got is, as this becomes more critical to your authentication process, if you lose your phone or if you forget your phone, we've got a problem, right? You can no longer do any work whatsoever. Even when I come into the office, I can't log into my desktop. We have this problem right now. Typically, we'll see this on a Monday as well. So especially with the new iPhone 8 coming, they all get excited. They've got their security token that's installed on their phone. They go into the iPhone store on Saturday with Apple, trade it in for the brand new 8. They come in on Monday morning and immediately realize that the system worked exactly as designed because they gave their phone back to AT&T, they wiped it afterwards, and their token is gone, right, forever. Now they can't log into the systems, they have to call the help desk, and that's an extremely painful process for everybody. We actually right now have anywhere between 5,000 to 8,000 calls per month dealing with password reset, unlock, or reissuance. It is a nightmare, right?
8,000?
Yes, depending on the month, and it's cyclical. we basically have to have several months, about 90 days for the password rotation policy, and you can actually just clock it, right? Every 3 months it's going to go straight up, and that's one of the real pain points that we're trying to solve here, in that for regulatory requirements and compliance requirements, we have to rotate those passwords, right? Putting aside the security implications and some of the NIST guidelines, which are thankfully getting a little bit more relaxed on the rotation policies, until those change, we have to rotate those passwords on a regular basis. Unfortunately, people are logged into multiple systems, right? They've got caching embedded within all these applications that have been keyed forever to use these passwords. So as soon as they change the password, we have an issue, right? And something will start getting locked out, and then it becomes just a spiral, right? They've got to call the help desk, we've got to get unlocked, we've got to make sure they're logged off all their systems, and I'm sure everyone here is intimately aware of that. So by killing the password, one of our selling points out to our employees is everybody hates calling the help desk, and somebody's had to do it. I've had to do it. Ironically, I was working on a previous version of this slide deck internally. I came in, I procrastinated all the way through the weekend. I knew it was going to happen, right? Came in on Monday morning, pop-up came up, no kidding, you've got to change your password this morning, right? I changed the password, it was about 6:30 in the morning. I started working on a slide deck very similar to this, and I printed out a copy of it, went to the printer, came back, no clue what I changed my password to, right? While I was working on a slide deck talking about killing the password. And so I'm like hunting around for anyone who has an open computer so I could go through the portal and reset it. I had to call the help desk and spend 30 minutes. It was just it's just an awful situation. So I'm intimately aware of this problem. So now we've taken that password, which they could fall back to, at least if they remembered it, they could log in the system. Now it's no kidding, you have to have your mobile phone at all times to access the system, and it has to be powered on, right? We still have some people who come in, they don't charge their phone overnight, and they can't log in until they power up their phone long enough to get it to come back online. So that being said, mobile has the best experience, but there's some pain points there. And we could also lose the phone or get it reset. One of the things that, again, coming back in 2017 has really made this possible, I think, to run out to the larger enterprise is FIDO. So we've adopted FIDO and the U2F standard. So we're rolling out keychains out to all of our employees. Of course, I have two of them. I have a YubiKey that I use for all my personal stuff, and also the vendor that we're going with rolling it out. So I have the same on my keychain, and we're using these as a recovery process or for an authentication option. As far as I'm concerned, I don't really care, right? You can use whatever you want. If you're more comfortable using your FIDO token to log into your desktop, use that. If you want to use your iPhone, use that option too. We're trying to adapt this to be whatever we want, whatever the employee wants to do. It's really your option. But most importantly, again, if the same thing happens on a Sunday afternoon, I come in, I realize that I've lost my phone or I've replaced it. I can log into the portal externally. This becomes my backup, which has been issued out to all the employees. And as soon as I come in through new employee orientation, we give it to them, say put on your keychain. We hope you'll never need this, but if you do, you'll use this as a recovery option. I can go and remove this phone as an authenticator and then add my new one back on. No cost to the help desk, right? Which is the key component. So those are the options that we're rolling out to the enterprise. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, but I want to speak to kind of the technology changes we had to do to make this possible. I think I already hit this unintentionally, but again, the thing to think as you're going through your enterprise, there's a lot of authentication experiences to get right? Nobody remembers when everything's working properly. When the password's working and you've got muscle memory down and you're able to key it in after a couple of seconds, nobody thinks about that, right? It's the unlock, the step-up authentication, and the emergency access. Those are the things that everyone remembers on. So when you're making your plans and you go to the enterprise, focus just as much energy into that process. The whole reason I was able to explain that iPhone loss scenario is that we've spent a tremendous amount of effort making sure that is a frictionless experience, because we know that it's going to happen at least once a year to an employee is going to change out their phone, right? If not more frequently as they lose the devices. So. And onboarding, again, as well. So you've got to think through some of the process around how do you onboard and proof the employee into the system. We can cover that later. Okay, so kind of backing into a little bit more of the technology that we needed to do to make this successful. This is just a very high-level architecture diagram. So at USA, we call it architecture diagram. It's not really meant to be anything specific, but it helps provide a visual overlay of what it would look like. So on the external side, these are the different clients that we have for people connecting into us. So mobile phones and tablets are growing. I've even had to log into my virtual desktop for my iPhone before and send an email. We have a lot more people starting to use iPad Pros because they're so convenient and they last all day long. They're thin, they carry it around. We also have what we call here, which is, again, the USA managed laptop. It's not directly joined to the domain, but we do manage it as an external resource, but it just gives the employees a lot more flexibility. I can access my personal Gmail and do everything I need to from a personal perspective on it, but it's not actually considered part of our domain. And then, of course, we still have quite a few people that bring their own computer. So although this is fairly lightweight and I do use it occasionally at home, 99% of the time, I use my personal MacBook Pro when I need to connect into our system, right? My goal is to make sure that regardless of which endpoint that you're using, you have the same experience every single time, right? Because what I don't want to do is change it based off of just because you're using a Mac now and this here. From an IT perspective, we don't care, but most of our business is going to be confused if it doesn't look the same every single time. So those are the different endpoints that we have connecting in. Those all interface into our mobile MDM provider that for email and mobile in our applications. You'll see. So I've tried to scrub as many vendor names as I can through this presentation for compliance and legal reasons. And also, we just don't want this to be a sponsorship for any of the products we use. So some of this is a little bit vague, but if you have any questions, I can address this. But the virtual desktop is the web interface that we use for logging into your virtual infrastructure. We also still have external portals, right? Things for HR. You need to log in, check your paycheck, or do some time entry type stuff. We still have external web access for that. We have quite a bit of single sign-on infrastructure that's still out there for people when they need to access things like exactly payroll, et cetera. And we still have VPN technology out there that's legacied. We are moving everyone over to a virtual desktop infrastructure, but there are use cases, especially if you look at our field adjusters, for example. So those are the workforce that we have that'll go out in the event of a natural disaster or a house fire or a hurricane. They deploy out for the members. They have domain join laptops, and they need to be able to, they're giant, tough book, heavy duty equipment, but they'll log into those systems, and when they need to, they'll connect using the VPN to send reports and pictures and stuff like that back up to our home office. So that's what it looks like for external access coming in. And this is the end state diagram of what we've done, is that we've really brought the virtual desktops and the physical desktops as well, all using the exact same authentication provider. So even if I'm using this right now, I can go to one of our desktops in a conference room. I can authenticate using the exact same options. Once I've logged into the desktop, one of the legs we'll talk about here in a little bit is, that's great, but how do I authenticate to our backend applications that was written in 1999 that still has a password? So I'll touch on that. Okay, so what are the other challenges that we had rolling this out to the enterprise? I've touched on this, is really we have a wide range of client computing devices. And we do that because we have lots of different worker profiles, and we have a varying level of, there's lots of different needs, right? We have domain join Windows desktops and laptops, somewhere like 80,000 of those that are connected. We've got several thousand Mac OS X's as well. Primarily those are designers, developers for our iPhone applications. There's a lot of reasons that we need to use Mac. So those are connected as well. We've also got the virtual desktop environment that we're migrating everyone over to do. And BYOD for both mobile and client computing options, right? And of course, the iOS, Android mobile devices. All of this, right, hidden behind those bullet points is a giant list of complexity, because one of the biggest challenges we have internally is coming through and said, Matt, this is great. Number one, when can I get it? And number two, what's the experience going to be? And it pains me, because it's like, well, tell me about yourself, right? What do you use when you connect every day? If you can tell me what you're using right? And what kind of employee you are, I can tell you what your experience is going to be, but it's this matrix that we're trying to kind of get rid of as we're centralizing everything. I don't really care. It's going to all be the same thing. The other big technology challenge we had here was that we found in fact, all of the multi-factor authentication vendors that we were looking at over the last several years, they do a great job of providing second factors, right? So username, password, and they'll bolt on another authenticator. But now we've just made it worse for everybody, right? Because we're gaining security, but significantly decreasing the experience for the employees. And I'll tell you, for those that are members and have worked with us, we really pride ourselves on the fact that we have a great experience for all of our members accessing through the various mechanisms. One of the mantras internally we have is that, our member experience as a member-owned organization, the member experience can be no greater than the employee experience, right? So we have to have an equal, if not better, experience for our employees so that they can share that with the members inside. So we didn't want to just make it worse by bolting on another authentication vendor. And we also, I can tell you offline about there's lots of ways to bypass that. We didn't really feel like it was really providing the security that we wanted to. So when we built this, we want it completely passwordless. Now, I already talked about the fact that we've got mainframe and legacy technologies behind the scenes. The passwords are still there in some cases, but we're working with some vaulting technology that will take the password, put it in a vault, rotate it on behalf of the user, and inject that when necessary. So we're just trying to obscure that for the employees as much as possible, which is what has enabled us to roll this out. Here's how we handle the action plan, right? Kind of a roadmap of how you can do this for your own companies. Number one, it required a lot of coordination with the IT operations team, whereas before we'd had a pretty good relationship to know what devices are you rolling out because we were able to secure them. Now it's, okay, no kidding, we need to be very closely understanding what are you rolling out to the workforce, what do your strategies look like over the next 18 to several years out for Macs, for example, right? How many Macs do you really project that you're going to be rolling out? Is that a focus area that we should work on or stay more on the Windows side? We've also assisted in funding a lot of consultation and integration. So migrating the technology, we've had to put aside part of our budget just to help other organizations bring them in. Everyone is very receptive to it. Everyone wants to solve this problem. So I went to the client computing team and said, hey, we're going to get rid of these 8,000 calls to the help desk. Fantastic. Nobody wants to answer those calls, right? Said, we just need you to change a lot of your technology and upgrade it to a version that it supports, and we're willing to help with bringing in consultants, right? You don't have to do it yourself. If you can find somebody or work with your vendors that know how to bring up that technology, we can help pay for them to come in and get you upgraded. So we found that to be extremely valuable. The big key for us was really migrating all of our authentication touch points to using SAML authentication. And that's important because SAML, if you're not familiar with it, is been around for maybe, 15 years, 10, 15 years. And is an industry standard authentication protocol. It's web-based. And at the end of the day, allows us to provide the experience. So as long as everybody comes to our centralized identity access management platform, we can make that decision process on who are you and which authentication option are you using. Once we have done all the hard work, right, we've centralized that, we just send a SAML assertion into whatever system you're logging in, and they don't have to worry about the authentication. If we add, let's say that this doesn't work out, and now we want to bring in another FIDO compliant technology, it's not a problem, right? We take on the burden of changing that system, and the backends don't have to change anything on their side. So that's been extremely valuable for us. When I talk about consulting and integration, the biggest chunk of that work was actually migrating our virtual desktop environment to accept SAML instead of Radius. It worked when they put it in 4 or 5 years ago, but now we're having to really forklift upgrade a massive infrastructure, right, that has a lot of people that are connected to it all day long. So the other thing I'll say too is that by moving everything over to SAML authentication, it's also provided a foundation to support Windows Hello and FIDO authentication coming out in Windows 10 as well. So as we migrate our desktops here that are managed over to Windows 10, we'll be able to take advantage of some of those capabilities, such as facial recognition, et cetera. So if you look at, did a kind of inventory of where do we have multi-factor authentication currently configured. You look at, this is the before picture. So VPN, virtual desktop, and privilege access were all keyed off of the Radius server, right? Which again is just doing the 6-digit code, which means all of those systems have that painful experience of waiting for the 6-digit code, right? Mobile applications, we were already connected in using our centralized identity access management platform with SAML. And then we have a couple other systems like the self-service password reset as well that were already using our one-time password token technology. So we took this right here, and what we've done this year is take that and migrated everything we can over to our centralized IAM platform using SAML. So the virtual desktops, the privilege access, mobile, and now the self-service password reset are all centralized into that same point. And then we still have VPN for some of our legacy clients because our VPN provider, which will remain nameless, does not support SAML. And I have let them know that they are the only component in our entire infrastructure that doesn't support it. And we are actively working on migrating that over to a new vendor that does support the future of authentication. So I've got that hanging around for another year, but we're closely getting rid of that pretty quick, and everything will support SAML, which I'm excited about. The physical desktops themselves are also back-ending off that same authentication infrastructure. So regardless of where you're coming in, it's going to be that same experience. Okay, so that's bringing in the authentication using a client. Now let's talk about when you actually log into the desktop. Sadly enough, the easy part was just getting people onto the workstation, which again, I'm obscuring a massive team of people that have really done a lot of heroics to get us up to this point. Now the challenge is I've logged into my Windows desktop. How do I get the users onto their applications that still have a password box in it? And the first step for that was really understanding that our technology standards, we've had standards in for decades that say that you have to use single sign-on technology and federated identity providers. Unfortunately, those standards weren't keyed around the experience perspective. So if an application team were to purchase a product, put it on the wire, and they do an LDAP call to our Active Directory infrastructure, technically it met the single sign-on requirement because it was back-ending off of our centralized domain infrastructure, right? So now what we had to do is come back and inventory all those applications and work with those teams to say, we know you put this in, but now we're changing our security standard and that you have to build this in a passwordless environment. So you've got to support more modern authentication protocols, migrating everything we can over to use Kerberos whenever possible, which in a lot of cases, the applications, it can do Kerberos. It was just more painful to do that the first time. And LDAP kind of met the requirement, and nobody had complained from this point. So migrating those users over to use Kerberos is our best option. If they don't support Kerberos, we migrate them using SAML, which again is where we come in for consultants sometimes. We have to upgrade the application to use a SAML assertion. Worst case scenario, we also have a enterprise level password vault tool that we are synchronizing the passwords for the domain over to that vault. And for every single application that can't support Kerberos or LDAP, we have a team of people that are taking the application and finding the username and password fields and teaching the software how to inject the credentials into that form field on behalf of the user. So most of the time, the users don't even see the screen. Effectively, the software works really as a rootkit, if you look at what it's doing, right? It's running behind the scenes and it's monitoring every single title and every single application that comes up. It sees the username password prompt for that user faster than they can even see it come up on a screen, and ejects the password and then logs the user in. So they never actually see the password. It's just obscured behind the scenes. So again, this has been one of the legs that we've had working off to the side. That was a tremendous effort. I think we had almost 3,000 applications that we had to inventory and work with the architects and the application teams for each one of them. And you go out and ask them a question and say, hey, how does your application authenticate? And they go, I don't know. It's always magic, right? You guys have always done that for us. We just pointed over here and it's happened. So we've had to work with them to understand what does Active Directory mean. Is it going off of the RACF, back-end mainframe systems? And then we say, do you have a password box? And it'd say, well, no, we don't. Say, that's great. How is it authenticating? I don't know, right? So we have the inventory. Is it Kerberos? Is it SAML? So a lot of that is just education. And again, it's nothing on the guys there. It's just kind of learned helplessness, right? We've done such a great job of taking the burden from security from them that now we're coming back and asking questions they didn't know. So this leg is going over here in trying to, like I said, get all the templates built so the single sign-on system can just inject those credentials on. The good news is that once we teach the program what that application looks like for one user, it gets put as part of a template, and then it's pushed throughout the entire Active Directory. So you only have to teach an application once, and now everyone will benefit from it. So again, this is what it looks like. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense after going through the explanation. Kerberos, SAML, OpenID, and Password Vault are what's allowing us to get to those applications on the back end, making this a true passwordless experience for the workforce member all the way through. Okay, so technology aside, right, what are the organizational challenges, which are arguably much more difficult for us to make successful here? First off, I touched on this a little bit, but I want to deep dive a little bit more into the recovery process. So one of the things that I'm excited to announce was that, I think almost 2 years ago, we did a big effort to kill all knowledge-based for our workforce as well. So up until that point, our employees would, as they're going through employee orientation, in my case, I think it was almost 7 or 8 years ago that I came through, we put in their password reset questions, right? Standard issued knowledge-based stuff. They could pick through, street you grew up on, mother's maiden name, right? Social engineering all day long for those questions. So we got rid of those about 2 years ago and went to a process where they had to use their one-time password, and they would have a PIN plus their one-time password in order to authenticate to the help desk. The help desk no longer asked them the mother's maiden name. They asked them, okay, I need you to read out the code onto your screen so I can authenticate that user, right? So we already had that rolled out, but now we had another problem because now they lose their phone, right? So that's where the FIDO token has really, really helped us kind of bridge that gap. There's another kind of a worst case scenario because now, so there's an edge case scenario where let's say that we have one of our workforce members like today, were to somehow go out to a conference, right? They leave San Antonio, they've left their iPhone in a taxi cab, they left their keychain with their convenient FIDO token, which we gave them to avoid this problem, maybe at home because it wasn't on their keychain, and now they're stuck, right? They need to log in. We still have a worst case scenario process, which is a peer vouching process, lovingly called phone a friend. And effectively, everyone just thinks it's crazy, but it actually works for us where they'll call up to the help desk and say, hey, it's Matt Hajda. I have lost everything, right? I have lost everything and I need help getting back on. Say, okay, that's not a problem. Do you have anybody that can vouch for your identity, right? So the first call is going to be to the manager for that employee to help vouch for their identity. And they'll get a call and say, hey, in my case, it's Ben. Say, hey, Ben, it's Matt. They'll bridge the calls together. I'm in Las Vegas attending a conference. I've lost my phone. I'm trying to get bootstrapped in the environment. And as long as he can authenticate me based off of my voice, what did we talk about last week, or some other phrase that they can use to understand, this is actually me. He says, yes, I can confirm this is actually Matt. Go ahead and bootstrap him back into the environment. Now, to avoid social engineering from there, Ben also has to authenticate himself using his VIP token and saying, okay, now it's actually Ben. We've authenticated Ben at a level to assure that's actually him. Now he can vouch for Matt, which is me. I can bootstrap again to get an iPhone, and everyone's happy again. So we do have an emergency access plan. We're hoping that as we roll this out and people have the FIDO tokens, that those calls will go drastically down. But it's always funny when I hear a call going out like from one of the other cubicles, and I was at somebody's desk where they called and I'm like, okay, yes, and they just hand the phone over to the person. I said, yes, I'm looking at him right now. He's a human. It's okay to reset his password. And they always roll their eyes. I'm like, oh, you don't understand. Like, there's a reason we have these processes. But they think it's hilarious, but anyways, it works. So that's something to consider. That's worked well for us. And then again, organizational challenges of rolling this out. So the workforce are very much accustomed to needing their multi-factor authentication when they connect in. Everybody knows if you're going to be connecting in to work from home or on the weekends, they go ahead and grab their phone, their token. While they're in the office, of course, this is a new message for everybody, right? We have some people. USAA is a long tenured company. They'll have people that'll work there 30, 40, 55, or 50 plus years, right? All they've ever known is username, password authentication, right? And now we're coming back to them and saying, hey, great news, you have something else to carry around, right? We're tempering that message with a conversation around the password authentication, right? So we don't usually lead in with the fact that we're have it carried around. We're coming through and saying, hey, do you hate passwords? And say, yes, I hate passwords. Like, fantastic. We've got a great new solution for you. We're rolling this out. All you have to do is carry the keychain around. And the reception has actually been really well received, right? Everybody understands the problem. And it also helps because we are a military organization, not a military organization, but we have a culture, right, that is very trust centered. So we understand the need to keep our members' information secure. And so everyone has been very receptive to understanding that this is actually improving the security of our workforce. Again, the other option too, focusing on the authentication options, right? Trying to provide clarity has been really tough for us. We haven't really cracked this. But I think we're getting close. And I will tell you that that list of authenticators could have been 40 or 50, right? Because I want to provide the most options to meet your needs. We've had to whittle it down because that message got so confusing as to which authenticator to use that we've really broken it down just to a mobile, non-mobile option. And it's a red pill, blue pill option. Which one do you want? Because you got to stick with it, right? Because the readers for the badges, they're about $40 a piece. So we don't want to roll those out if possible. We want to try to lead people down the mobile path. But if you don't want to do that, we have an option. But we're trying to provide people a choice, but also clarity in the fact that we need you to stick with whichever one you've got for a little bit of time because it's costing us money every time you make that choice. So. And then, of course, rolling out to the workforce, critical to make sure you have early engagement with your experienced design teams. So we're blessed with a lot of focus, especially from an external perspective for our membership, and that we don't have any physical locations, right? So the only interaction our 12 million plus members have with us is through our mobile applications and through our external website for the most part. So we have great teams of people that deal with user design and testing and analysis. So we've partnered with them very early on in this process to say on the workforce side, we need you to do that same level of analysis to make sure this is a good experience. Lots of communication plan, again, out to the business leadership team. You've got to get buy-in for every organizational unit because it is a change, right? This is not a easy process to change something they've been doing for a long time. And it takes, it'll take probably 15 minutes, right, at minimum to take a user, run them through the process, build out their iPhone application, and teach them how to use the process. So it's a significant expense. So we need to make sure that the higher level executives understand and can sell that message out to their employees on why this is so important. Focusing on reducing pain, I covered that. And also we've got quite a few animated videos, which has been really nice to be able to help explain, little explainer videos like the hands that come up, and then we've got teams of people that are really talented at that stuff. So they've created videos internally to say why we're doing that, explain through. They're 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes for each one of those. We've started sprinkling those out for communication out to our employees. Our office, our headquarters in San Antonio, Texas, it is the world's largest office building. So the Pentagon, technically, the building is bigger, but we have more usable square footage. So we just got a little asterisk. There's a little asterisk on there. It's kind of a little competition. They keep adding a few more inches onto the side, but we're very proud of that building. But the great thing about it is that I think it's a mile from one end of our campus to the other. And so we've got video screens, every couple hundred feet that'll start advertising this, so people have awareness that the changes are coming, and those videos will help for that. And then of course, lots of booths and help tables within the campuses. We're doing those now primarily just to get excitement. And as we started to roll out over the last few months, we're starting to see a lot of people who, now we have people who have it, and now we have people who don't have it. And so the people who don't have it, they want it. So part of the communication at those tables has been, your time is coming, but we can't do everyone at once. So just be patient, and we're trying not to jump too far in line. Yeah. So the question was that this is focusing on our workforce, and is there a question that we're going to roll this out to the end users? Can you help clarify? I think he has a microphone here. What do you mean by the end users, as far as our membership?
Yeah. Like disclaimer, I'm a member. And
okay.
I've always just loved all the pioneering.
Yep.
Functionality that you guys have had. So, just if that's an ultimate strategy to kind of, get away from the password.
Yes.
As we know it altogether for end
Are you
users.
a plant in the back? This is a fantastic question. No, this is great. Thank you. It's interesting. I spoke a few last month out in Florida as well, and somebody had the exact same question. This is actually, we're behind the curve for the workforce side. USAA, for our membership, we were the first industry to roll out biometric capability on the iPhone. We've already killed the password on the mobile sides. We'll use face, fingerprint, or voice biometrics on the mobile application in order to use authentication. We've rolled out the Symantec VIP token out to our members probably 7 or 8 years ago. I'm kind of looking over here because one of the guys on the team who runs that is over here is responsible for that. So I think the answer is yes. What we're trying to do there is balance security and convenience. What we find there is that I think we don't do a good job of explaining out to all of the membership that we have really good authentication options that you don't have to use a password. So hopefully that addresses it. But yeah, we're actually even farther advanced over on that side. And one of my peers is responsible. He's another architect that's responsible for the member side. I always give him a hard time. I'm like, man, that's a piece of cake. You only have 3 touch points. It's the mobile application, it's the website, and people calling in over the voice, right? I mean, how hard is it to do multi-factor authentication on those 3 touch points? I've got 100 different devices, and so we have a friendly competition going to see who can get there faster. But
you only have 30,000 users.
Yes.
You have 13 million.
Yeah, but it's, again, I have 30,000 devices, so again, there's a matrix in there and how hard it is. But yeah, if you have any questions on that, this guy over here can help. He leads one of the teams that's directly responsible for the member authentication experience, and I think we're really proud of how easy it is to authenticate once you set that up for the member side. Microphone.
I had a question about your journey on bringing your internal applications into the SSO fold. How was that process, and did you have to complete it before you actually started rolling it out to your internal users?
Oh, good question. Yep. So I'm not sure if it's being echoed, but the question is around applications and single sign-on. How long was the journey, and whether or not it was a requisite? We are running them in parallel. I will tell you that it has taken a lot longer than we anticipated, just because of the communication process. I mean, we're a little bit idealistic in that we can build a survey. We do have a very strong ITIL process at USAA, so we've got a good inventory of the applications, but we had not asked the questions before as a configuration item to say, how are you authenticating into the network? Because honestly, it hadn't been a huge concern. So we were kind of optimistic that, hey, we can add these questions in and everyone will answer the questions. Maybe it'll take us a couple of months to get the information. It took probably almost a year to get everyone to really answer the questions correctly and coach it. So, and I will tell you that originally when we started this effort, our plan was to both roll out multi-factor and kill the password at the same time. Based off of how many applications that we've had to do single sign-on, what we decided to do is actually, we're going to do the rollout initially with multi-factor to the workstation and all the touch points. Some of the back-end applications are still going to have passwords on them. As in the single sign-on path, we think we'll probably clear up next year to where all the applications are single sign-on, and we're going to have to circle back with the employees again to say, okay, now you're fully passwordless. So the answer is we had to run 2. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it at the same time. our original thought was just we only had to touch the employee once, so it was better to do it at the same time, but we just found that unattainable. I said there were several hundred applications that had to be changed, and it wasn't possible. But I will tell you that again, if you can get a vaulting technology in place for those worst case scenarios, that was the key for us to do that successfully. But yeah.
So if you're using an external SAML identity provider, what can you do if they get breached or if they have downtime?
Yeah, good question. That is a tough. So the question is about availability for the external SAML provider. We mitigate that as best we can through contracts and making sure that we partner with organizations that have a high level of assurance for availability. The answer is we can't, right? Most of the systems only accept one SAML assertion and one certificate signing key by design, right? So there's a level of risk that we absolutely can't work around, and it's something that we think a lot about. We have, for some of the more critical systems, we have contingency plans in place. For example, the system that we use to log into the virtual desktop, right? That is arguably the most critical system because let's say I use SAML to log into Box or my Office 365 account, right? So if I need to access a document, for me, it's not a big deal, right? So if SAML goes down for me to connect to a PowerPoint slide deck, I can work through it, right? If it's down for an hour, for workforce isn't going to be impacted. But if I can't connect to my virtual desktop, I'm completely down, right? For those systems that are critical, we do have contingency plans in place to use our on-premise. We have an identity access management stack on-prem that we can pivot to use that one, change out the keys in a relatively short time frame to return to service. So we've mitigated that just through contingency plans for right now. Fortunately, we've been very lucky, and we've partnered with organizations that do have great cloud-based solutions, and so far the availability has worked out for us. But yeah, I lose a lot of sleep on that question. Thanks for that.
I have a question. I'm just missing the concept. Basically, your two-factor is the phone and the key.
Oh, sure.
And where I'm trying to figure out is like, and you don't require a password, so someone just stole my backpack that has my key and my phone and my laptop.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, good question. I'm sorry. I didn't explain that very well here. So for multi-factor authentication, it either has to be something that you know, you have, or you are, right? Those are the three different options. We generally always have something that you know. While we have killed the password, we've replaced it with a much simpler PIN, which is just a 6-digit, single-digit number. On every one of our systems that accesses it, you still have a PIN. The value add to our employees is that this is something that you have to rotate. TBD on exactly how often that you will have to rotate that. We're working through our compliance and regulatory providers to see how often that we really have to rotate the PIN. If it was up to me, you would never change your PIN. So we still have that second factor. If I were to steal your backpack with your phone, I still need the knowledge of which PIN to use. Same thing with the keychain. So we can't authenticate to the system with two things that you have.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense? I know
Yeah,
that's.
I was just trying to figure
I know. I did gloss over that.
You do need a password. It's just a 6-digit.
That's right, yes. We still have a password, it's just that we've made it a little bit easier experience. We've gone from the complexity of, alphanumeric, and if you just look at the, PCI security guidelines, right? I mean, it's a headache. They have to be very specific. We are blessed with, mainframe technology. Some of those are partners that are, they're not even mainframes that we use, right? So we have to use the worst possible experience and lowest common denominator. And some of those have some really insane password requirements. So in fact, to be honest, we have 3 different password policies for the employees. And I could tell you, I'm also responsible for the system that synchronizes the passwords. And so we've got to do a lookup to figure out what type of user they are and figure out which password policy they meet and get the strongest for their environment.
Yeah, I have one more follow-up, then
Yep.
I promise that I'll quit. So now I'm in your system. Do you SSH to other environments, or you don't have to deal with any more logins? So my question is, do you use SSH, I guess?
Yes, we do. Yeah, the operations side, I mean, certainly within IT, has lots of SSH connections. If it's privileged access, so if it's going to be system administration work or security administration work, that is going through our privileged access management system. Well, I authenticate into that using a SAML assertion, and then that brokers all of my SSH access to the privileged access. If you're connecting directly through SSH for a non-elevator, non-privilege, we use Kerberos to connect from your Windows workstation. So you use your Kerberos token to SSH to that Linux system, which is also joined to the domain, so they don't need the password there either. So yes, we do use it, but we've been able to kill that using Kerberos or using our privileged access management system. Yep.
So for legacy applications, you mentioned password injection. That sounded like it was done on the client side.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you enforce multi-factor with that?
We're not. I mean, the answer is how do we force multi-factor with the password injection? We're not. We ensure that the user is multi-factored as they're logged onto the workstation, so they can't actually get to the workstation or initiate that session without multi-factoring. Once they're on the system, it's not multi-factored for them to inject the password. Yeah, unfortunately, you could go off on a tangent and trying to figure out how to do that, but it's really tough to do. At the end of the day, the long-term strategy is, of course, part of the conversation as we're bringing these applications into password injection is to building a waiver process. So the waiver process says, hey, you're not meeting our standard, and we have to recertify every year why that's the case, right? So we've provided incentives for the people who are responsible for those to start replacing them, get them onto Kerberos and get them onto SAML, so you no longer have to certify every year. And of course, it starts escalating as to why we're not getting this thing up to standard. So eventually, we'll get rid of everything that still has that password. Yeah, good questions. That's true. Yeah. No, the question is around membership to USAA. So for those that aren't aware, the membership requirements, you have to either honorably served in the military yourself, or a parent has to have honorably served in the military, or there's a couple other different affinities. I myself was not a member of USAA. I'd never heard about USAA until I was recruited to come down there. And as soon as you join USAA, you are considered a member. There's a little caveat there. I think it takes 5 years to be considered a full member to the organization. So for things like property and casualty insurance, there's a bunch of legal stuff around it. But for things to be able to insure my car and house, you have to be employed or have worked there for more than 5 years before you get turned into a full-fledged member of USAA. So, but we're hiring. If you're interested, if you want to join, if you're not a member, we'd love to have. People who are coming to these security conferences, the exact type of people that we want working for us at USAA. So definitely see us, or one of my partners here if you're interested. Go out. We're always looking for talented security people to come join and work for us. It's a great place to work. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.